Culotta Show live here on this Tuesday morning. As always, brought to you by Katie's Restaurant down in New Orleans. Check out our friend Katie's online, katie'sinmidcity.com. katie'sinmidcity.com is where you find them online. We were talking some LSU women's basketball, and Angel Reese was named a semifinalist for the Naismith Defensive Player of the Year. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up inside the second hour. Right now, talking some recruiting, and we always lean on one of the best, Billy Embody over at On 3 and a part of the Bengal Tiger. He's with us weekly here, giving us the recaps and what's going on. It's a busy time in recruiting right now as LSU had a ton of visitors on campus last night and some heavyweights, last weekend, including number one overall prospect Bryce Underwood. So let's bring in our guy Bill here on this Tuesday morning to give us the latest on how the weekend and what's going on, a new commitment as well. Bill, good morning. How are you?
Doing well, guys. How are you?
Doing good. This was a big weekend in recruiting, this past one in Baton Rouge. What was the buzz?
Yeah, it was a big weekend in Baton Rouge, and LSU landed a 4-star linebacker in Charles Ross out of the Houston area. He goes to North Shore High School. He's a guy that on 3 moved up into our on 300, and he's been clocked around the 10.5 range in the 100-meter dash, so he's got some speed to him without a doubt, and Blake Baker really prioritized him over the last really couple months after he offered when he got off the recruiting trail this past recruiting contact period, and quickly got him to campus and quickly closed the deal. So that was big from that standpoint. And then you have a lot of star power that returned to campus. You had Bryce Underwood, who is back in town, Dorian Moore, the number one wide receiver as well, joining him to recruit for LSU. And they had multiple elite wide receivers like Caleb Cunningham, Jamie French, Aaron Gregory on campus, some top offensive line targets, a really impressive haul of defensive linemen that Bo Davis was hosting, and Blake Baker had other top targets for his staff on campus as well. So a big weekend overall, and LSU really did a nice job with it.
One of the names that we were watching going into the weekend was Micah Dotson, offensive lineman, Mobile, Alabama, at one time committed to Georgia, big-time prospect. He was on commit watch, didn't make it in. What's that mean?
Yeah, I think with Micah Dotson, he and his family just want to continue to make more visits. He's not too far removed from that Georgia decommitment. And so now he can kind of, instead of probably coming into town with commitment on his mind, or at least, reading the tea leaves, you would think with 2 visits in such a short time frame, now you have a guy who is going to make it back for spring practices later this month, from what we're told, and then during that time before that, maybe make a couple more visits or think things through a little bit more, just to make sure you're making the right decision. And Brad Davis, as much as he would like his entire board and coaches all around the country would love their entire board to be committed by the end of March and stay locked in, there are ebbs and flows with this. And, last cycle, I made the comparison. Marcus Muscole was silently committed to LSU. They thought he was coming, and he ended up not, and they end up getting better players, at least rankings-wise, because he ended up, with Florida. And I'm not saying Micah Dotson is going to go elsewhere, but Brad Davis continues to recruit like his guys are uncommitted. With Micah Dotson, he continues to press for him, and as Micah goes through his process and sees other campuses, if that keeps leading him back to LSU in the end, which from what we've heard, he's pretty keen on and very, very high on, then that's just going to make his commitment stronger in the end, because he's going to feel like he's gone through his process. That is, if he ends up at LSU when it's all said and done after these additional visits.
All right, Colin Hurley's on campus. You got Bryce Underwood committed, and the next name in line looks like Diab Bell, who is former NBA standout Rajah Bell's son out of the Fort Lauderdale area. What's the latest with Diab Bell?
Yeah, I really like Diab Bell. I actually saw Dia for the first time, in action this fall. He played Colin Hurley, and I went down to watch the game and see Colin. And here's this kind of a player that reminds you a little bit, or reminded me at least a little bit of like Jaden Daniels and Justin Fields. Jaden more in his frame and kind of how he's a little, thin in a way, but he was just so young. He was a sophomore out there playing for American Heritage, and he was just so smooth and calm and cool back there when Heritage beat Colin Hurley and his team. And I was really impressed and talked to him after that game, and LSU was in contact back then. And Joe Sloan does a really nice job of his process, when it comes to evaluating and offering quarterbacks. And Dia was always someone that I felt like LSU would offer in the end, just because of the amount of contact that Joe Sloan was having with his camp and things like that. And sure enough, they ended up making the move and offering. And so Dia wanted to get to campus as soon as that happened, and he did. And I really, really am high on Diab Bell. I think he reminds me a little bit of Jaden as far as just his look physically, and then he's got some of the really natural athletic tools that Jaden has. I think Dia probably not as fast as Jaden. Jaden can obviously really go, but just kind of how they're built physically, they'll remind you a little bit of each other if you watch their tape. And so he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, number 2 quarterback in the nation on the On3 industry ranking, and he's going to be one of the highly rated guys to go, probably wire to wire, as one of the top quarterbacks in the country when it comes to rankings for this cycle. I'm really high on Diab Bell. Joe Sloan's done a really nice job there, and Dia told me that LSU is very high on his list, and I would expect them to be a player in his recruitment throughout. I think it's going to be interesting to see, obviously, when you have a guy in the class ahead of him like Bryce Underwood, who is expected to be superstar, how that would weigh in a recruitment for any 2026 quarterback. But if Dia, and maybe, who knows, maybe the professional ties with his dad being Rajah Bell could help here. Just the development angle is something they've really pitched to him and showed him a lot of on his visits to LSU. He's made a couple now that, hey, you could sit behind a Bryce Underwood or whoever's at quarterback, learn, redshirt that year, and then we'll get you into the games, as your 2027, 28 seasons unfold, and whatever that looks like, we'll navigate it with you, but come be developed and we'll turn you into a heck of a football player.
Bill, am I reading this right? I know it's going to be a roller coaster ride to hang on to a lot of these number ones at their spots for the next year, but Dorian Moore, is he putting out a top 4 on Twitter? Am I getting got by the internet?
Yeah, no, you're not getting got by the internet. It's just one of those things where, one, it's a graphic, so it's probably just a little eye catching, but it is correct in the sense that Dorian Moore is down to 4 schools. And I talked to his mom on Sunday at Under Armour Dallas and talked to Dorian as well, and they're done communicating with other schools is what they're telling the media, and they're telling us. And LSU is a school he loves. He's committed to it. He really enjoyed getting back on campus. His mom really honed in on what they showed him this time around, which was the new recovery facilities and also all the VR technology that LSU has to show him all these different environments and games and things like that and practices to throw different things at him. And help him prepare and develop him, for whatever level, college, NFL. That's a big piece for Dorian, because if you watch him, whatever school does get him, and I think it's going to end up being LSU, enjoy him for 3 years. He's out of here. So he's really, really special, but he is going to take a spring game visit to Texas. He's potentially going to get back to Oregon. He's potentially going to visit Ohio State. And he wants to take 4 official visits to LSU, Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State. And it wouldn't be a surprise to see him get back to Oregon. He's been there before, and he's been there since he's committed to LSU as well. So those 4 schools make a ton of sense in terms of who he's actually talking to. They've just whittled it down now to those are the 4 schools he's talking to, but he's still very much committed to LSU. So, it's kind of just however it's phrased is, just whatever it is. He's committed to LSU. He's very much locked in a sense, but his door is not completely shut on other schools.
Bill, I know recruiting tactics have changed and do change every single year. Odell Beckham was a big name for Dorian Moore when referencing LSU, and Beckham in years past, before the I believe it was a 2-year ban on his ability to come around the program. Do they use alumni? Do they use personalities like Beckham anymore in recruiting?
Yeah, I don't know where OBJ stands, so I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
But I know that I know the show clause and all that's passed.
Yeah, that's passed. So I don't know where they're at with that. But I will say this. I mean, a guy like Dorian Moore and Bryce Underwood and DJ Pickett and some of these other highly touted guys, they're in contact with all sorts of high-end prospects or excuse me, high-end players in the NFL, whether it be on trips like Dorian went to the Super Bowl, or not the Super Bowl, but he was out there in Vegas for a Nike event and got a chance to be in that experience with Bryce Underwood. And those are things that are afforded elite prospects who are viewed as kind of 3-and-out guys, and that companies like Under Armour, for example, Dorian Moore just worked out a little bit out there on Sunday. What he did was incredibly impressive, and he was the MVP for us because of it. But Under Armour wants him out there because at the end of the day, Under Armour would love to see Dorian Moore, be a UA guy. Yeah. But they get in contact with NFL players because these NFL players, I mean, show them a little bit of respect, and obviously these high school guys have a lot of respect for them, and the same goes for elite college players. These guys travel the country, going to all sorts of camps and visits and tournaments, and they're celebrity players, involved with 7-on-7 teams in some cases. So yeah, I think LSU taps into the alumni group for sure. One player I will say that I've compared to Dorian Moore's kind of style to is Jets a little bit. I think the way he can stop and turn on a dime and create some yards after catch is really impressive. Everybody talks about Dorian's top end speed, but his route running is just, I mean, it's pretty sick. He kind of can move like a Zachariah Branch a couple years ago, could set people up and make them look foolish out there. And against a pretty deep defensive back group at UA Dallas, he did that again. So, I think there's definitely an alumni angle though overall.
Yeah, and speaking of Jets, I mean, even more to prove your point, we've seen video of him pop out of working out with guys like BB Causey and some LSU commits and big time recruits. So, Bill, you brought up DJ Pickett, and it was a big weekend, and obviously he's a big name that all LSU fans are keeping an eye on. What's the latest with Pickett?
Yeah, kind of nothing's really changed. He's going to take a bunch of official visits this summer, and LSU is going to be the one that I think leads it off, at least in his June run. But LSU sits at the top entering the back half of spring, and if LSU can reel him in, obviously that resets where you look at the cornerback room as a whole. You'd have Jabari Antoine and you'd have DJ Pickett on board if they can get him. That would be an elite haul, and LSU continues to swing for a lot of high-end talent at the defensive back position now that Corey Raymond's kind of overseeing that whole group again. And I think the comfort level with Corey Raymond, the staff that they've worked on, the staff that's been here working on DJ Pickett has just made him feel really comfortable. We've got to see it weather all these other visits and keep the momentum going. But talking with a couple sources around DJ Pickett's recruitment, things are in a really good spot, and him getting back was a really important visit for him. And who knows, maybe he comes back for the spring game, but he's definitely coming back for an official visit in early June.
Bill, what other names popped this weekend?
Players that popped in for visits. I would circle the defensive line as a group that was really impressive, and Bo Davis has, I think, done a really nice job of building off of his recruiting board at Texas, which, mind you, Texas was getting ready for the SEC. And so it's a comparable board to what you would want to see being recruited at LSU. And then also getting in maybe a little deeper with other players that have emerged. And one player that he got on campus right away when he got here was Zion Williams from Lufkin in East Texas. And he's a prospect considered a heavy Texas lean, entering 2024, and Bo Davis leaves and LSU gets a visit right away. And then he's back right away once the dead period ends to visit again. He's supposed to come for the spring game. He's supposed to come for an official visit. LSU's the team to beat there. And he's a big 6'3", 6'4", 300-pound defensive tackle, and that's exactly what LSU needs. They finished really strong in the 2024 defensive line haul with Don McKinley and Gabe Relaford, but you need a big body to come in this 2025 class, and if it can be Zion Williams, that'd be huge. You also have prospects like Jordan Crawford, who's committed to Auburn, another massive human being there, and LSU has really made that Birmingham Parker program a priority. They swung through a couple times to see him and Timothy Merritt, who's a defensive back there, and they've got some other high-end prospects on that team overall. But I was talking with Shea Dixon, my coworker, before last weekend happened, and once Timothy Merritt locked in his visit, I said, I wouldn't. Maybe Jordan Crawford. He keeps it close to the vest. Maybe he pops in, and sure enough, he did, which shows, hey, there's some interest there. And Jeremiah McLeod, a Mississippi State defensive line pledge out of Florida, visited as well, and he's a prospect on the rise, another defensive tackle type of prospect, more of a 3-tech, but nonetheless, they need to beef up that interior. They're doing a really good job getting players on campus to experience LSU and stack their board and get those official visits lined up after that. So Bo Davis is working it, man. He's done a really nice job since arriving in Baton Rouge.
Edna Karr has always been a good spot for LSU and a lot of colleges around college football. Obviously, Coach Brown's got it going on over at Karr. They have Teron Francis committed right now, but there are some prospects that LSU are keeping their eyes on coming out of that program. What's the future look like for the Cougars?
Right. Teron Francis is really, really quite the player that LSU has committed at wide receiver, so he's going to be fun to watch. But Aiden Hall, a 4-star safety, stopped by for practice last week. He's in the 2026 class. And then you have Richard Anderson in the 2026 defensive line class in Louisiana that is loaded. And, of course, you have Corey Adams in the 2025 class on the defensive line. And I'm sure there will be others that pop up. But LSU sits in a good spot for really – all those guys, and they don't say much normally. I remember, I think Teron Francis committed at like 11:30 at night one weekend, just out of the blue, and didn't say much. So that's kind of par for the course when it comes to Karr kids and committing. But the rest of them are all really talented players too, and so we'll be keeping a close eye on them, and maybe some more fireworks happen. I know they'd love to get some of the 2026 guys on board and start getting them, recruiting.
Another wide receiver that keeps popping up on LSU's board and other boards is Jamie French, the wide receiver, big 5-star, was at one point maybe committed to Alabama, decommitted. Where does LSU stand with him?
Yeah, they sit in a good spot. Ohio State's kind of been viewed as a leader for him coming off of the Alabama decommitment, and he's a really, really talented prospect that LSU's been pursuing. I think they've made some maybe dents in where things stand for the Buckeyes there, but it's going to potentially be a winding road on that one. I still think Ohio State probably has a little bit of an edge, but LSU is going to host him for an official visit and get an opportunity to keep chipping away at that. And I do know he's high on LSU. He was high on him pretty early on in his recruitment, and then just things kind of happened, and he ends up going elsewhere for a minute, but opens things back up and gets an opportunity to kind of redo the recruiting process. And so he's giving them, I think, a little bit more of an in-depth look. And things have changed. You've got Bryce Underwood now committed for LSU, so that wasn't the case when he made his decision the first time around. So LSU's right in the mix. He's got some family in the area as well, so that could play a role. And they did a great job on that visit this weekend.
Bill, last one to get you out of here. The linebacking class here in 2024 is very impressive, including the stack that they already got on campus, headlined by Tylen Singleton and Kalaj Cobbins. What about this class that they're putting together following that up? Obviously, Keelan Moses and then the Charles Ross commitment. What are they looking for at that position? Because it seems like they're bringing in a lot of speed.
Yeah, a lot of speed. And we mentioned that with Charles Ross. He's got verified, sub 1,100 meter times, which is really impressive at about 6'2", 200. And he's a player. I saw him play for North Shore a couple times this past year, and he really impressed me. But when you look at who else they're recruiting, Tavion Wallace is another that popped in this weekend. His brother's Trevin Wallace, who played at Kentucky, is going to be an NFL draft pick, was a really well thought of prospect in his own right. And now LSU's hoping to get an official visit with Tavion. We'll see. He's got a pretty packed schedule this summer already, but we'll be keeping a close eye on if he changes that and adds LSU into the mix. And then you have Jonah Williams, who's being recruited at safety, but is the number one linebacker in the country out of Galveston Ball. Blake Baker has really worked hard on that one, trying to get them into the mix a little bit more, and we'll see if it pays off. He's a big baseball guy, so he took in some of the baseball stuff, things going on this weekend with LSU. But, yeah, the linebacking group has the potential to be a fun one in 2025 if they can make a move and get a guy like Jonah Williams or Tavion Wallace to add to Charles Ross and Keelan Moses.
Busy time right now in recruiting. Nobody covers it better than our guys over at On 3, Billy Embody and Shay Dixon. Got a great podcast to keep up with what you need to hear around LSU recruiting at the Bengal Tiger. Bill, as always, we appreciate it. We'll talk next week.
Thanks a lot, Jordy. Appreciate it.
There he is, Billy Embody, On 3, latest in